Hey guys, it's Mark again with Footprint Productions, footprint-productions.com. Here it is, as promised. I'm going to show you how to make paper fly through the air as realistically as possible with as little overhead as possible in your scene. So as you can see, I've got a scene here. I hit play. I've got paper that will group together almost kind of like a flocking motion, and it gives you a nice simulation. You can see how the paper is bending, twisting, interacting. Looks like it's interacting with turbulence in the air. Really nice. And like I said, it's not a whole lot of overhead, and as you can see here, it's cached into memory. So if I wanted to, at the end, after I get this animation set, I can come in and animate things around it without much overhead on my computer. It's not going to slow me down very much at all. So a little history of how I tried to go about doing this that didn't quite work out. I tried with the standard emitter. I thought that was my first thought. That was my first test. Hey, I'm going to put an emitter in there and drop this stuff as a child of it, and that didn't quite work because once I had the paper, a single piece of paper simulated, I drop it in the emitter. The emitter, every particle at birth was not the beginning of that animation. It was wherever in the animation you were in time. So that was not cool. That's not what I wanted. So kind of threw particles out of the window, both standard and thinking particles. If there's a way to do it with thinking particles, I welcome anybody to bring that forth because I'd love to learn that. I'm not much into thinking particles. I've played with it a little bit, but still haven't wrapped my head around it quite yet. So maybe we can learn that together. Let's take a look at this and see if we can't build it, teach you how to build it, and hope you like it. Let's go. Let's create a new scene. Change this render setting here because I hate that. I don't know why it has changed itself back to that. All right, now we're HD, baby. Okay, we'll start with a plane, and just based on my experience, we'll go with 150 by 200, and that gives you a generic little paper shape. Now there's a couple of different ways you can go about doing this. You can do this with soft bodies. Go to right click on your object, simulation, soft body. I've found that I prefer using cloth. I think to me it seems a little bit more controllable, a little bit more natural. Plus I ran into some minor issues with the soft body, so I chose to go with cloth. So in order to use this as a cloth object, you have to make it editable. So I'll hit C on the keyboard or click this button here to make this object editable. Right click on it, and we'll add a simulation tag, cloth. Okay, and let's, for neatness sake, go ahead and name this paper. We'll even call it paper space 1. All right, now we'll go to the cloth, and I like to give a little bit more iterations because it gives a little bit more structure to the cloth. The bounce, everything else I pretty much leave standard on the tag properties drop down here. Next, very important here, just for this stage, drop that gravity there on your cloth tag to 0. That way when you hit play, it doesn't drop out of frame, makes it easier to animate. Trust me on that. Try chasing down a piece of a plane in your scene flying around all over the place. It's easier if its gravity is set to 0. We don't want wind and we don't want turbulence in this respect. We want something with a little bit more control over it, so I like to use the built-in simulation particle turbulence. We'll need one of those. We'll go to simulation particles rotation. We'll need one of those. Now, before we drop these anywhere into affecting this cloth, let's take one look at this drop down here. Now if you click on your cloth tag, it looks different. So don't get confused if you see it formatted this way. You can still click expert. You'll have this include box. It doesn't really tell you what you're trying to include. So it's, sometimes overlooked that it's even here. But if you click this little arrow, it gives you a question mark with your cursor. Come up and you can click once on turbulence, once on rotation. And now both of these forces, particle forces, will affect your cloth. And again, to get out of that pick whip tool, you just click the pick whip, or I believe you can right click somewhere and make it go away. There we go, stop pick session. Alright, so right now if we hit play, both the turbulence and the rotation take effect on that cloth. They don't have to be grouped together or anything of that nature. I like to do it just as a practice of neatness to keep the scene organized so I don't get confused. I like to name everything, keep everything organized. So now if we hit play, alright, how are we going to deal with that? That's crazy, right? Well, we can tone that down. These are default settings that came with these two force effectors here. Let's give us 300 frames, give us something to work with. Drag that out. Okay. And let's rewind. I try to make all of my changes at the time of 0. Sometimes it doesn't matter, but sometimes it'll really screw things up if you don't. So let's look at the rotation. 20, way too high. Okay. Let's drop that down to like 3, okay? And because we don't want this thing spinning out of control. It's not a wheel, it's not a motor. We just want a little bit of variance in this piece of cloth, okay? And I want to click respect dynamic mass, okay? And let's take a look at the turbulence. You've got 4 settings here. Again, we're going to respect the dynamics mass. We want to change the scale. Let's go a higher scale, but we want a lower frequency. Let's try 20%. And let's change the scale just to give us a round number to 440. Okay, now if we hit play again, you'll see a difference. A little bit more controlled, not quite as crazy. But the one thing I don't like is this circular motion that this rotation's giving me. It's giving me a very organized circular motion, and you will not find that if you see a piece of paper flying around outside. It's just not going to behave this way. So the reason it's doing that is this rotation is centered right here at the time of 0, which is directly in the middle of that plane. So when I hit play, it begins to rotate, and it's quite obvious what direction that is rotating. What direction that force is rotating in the negative x direction, okay? And that's all it does. But what you can do to make that a little bit more random and organic, let's rewind. Select that rotation, right click, Cinema 4D tags, and vibrate. Now, this is very much the same thing as the wiggle expression in After Effects. You put that on anything, you can change its position, scale, and rotation based on random values, a relative value, a random seed, and a pulse. We're going to use relative, random seed, and rotation. So we'll put in some random numbers here. Don't really care what they are. All we want to do is give this some sort of variance to give it more of an organic feel. So let's drop this frequency down a little bit. We don't want this to go crazy. Let's go 1. And what we will also do is take this rotation, because I want this to pretty much stay with this piece of quote-unquote paper. So I want to drop that as a child of it. It's still affecting the cloth engine, but now when this paper moves, you'll see the rotation travel with it. And you can see the rotation doing its random thing. And that's what this vibrate tag is doing, is it's giving us a random rotation. Gives it a little bit more of an organic feel to the cloth simulation. Now we can turn that off. Now let's look at our turbulence. I don't think we're getting quite enough, so let's boost this up to 20. Now we're getting there. Now we're getting this floaty, kind of crinkly paper floating through the air, organic simulation. And that's very nice. That's getting close. So what I'm going to do is we're going to add another turbulence. Click on your turbulence, hold down Control, drag. Control will give you the little plus sign. Create another one. Don't forget to go to your cloth engine and drag that new turbulence in. Okay. And this one, let's change it. Let's come down a little bit, bring up the frequency, and let's put 35 on the strength. And let's see what we got. Let's see, now we're getting some different twists, some different turns on this paper. You know what, for this tutorial and for our purposes, I think that'll do it. Let's go ahead and give us 500 frames though. Give us a little bit more time to look at this. And that's good. We'll call that good for this particular one. We're going to make several of these. That's the key to this, is make as many of these as you can. It makes it as dynamic as it can be. So let's take this. Now your first inclination and my first inclination was to, well, all I have to do now, I've got that simulated, I'll have to just calculate my cache. Well, while that's true, it kind of limits you, because now you have to recreate, you at the very minimal have to recreate this object. Okay, I don't like recreating things. I like building something and using it as a template to make varying and different versions of the same thing and make it easier and faster. So instead of using the inbuilt cache in the cloth engine, I'm going to right click on that paper object, go to character tags, and go to point cache. Now this is just a really handy little thing. So let me show you what this does. Rewind back to 0, click this button here, store state. Okay, then you want to enable it, and then enable PSR, which stands for position, scale, and rotation. We want it to record those values. Now what this tag does, I'm going to go ahead and hit calculate, is it's going to simulate this. It's going to run through every frame in the timeline, and every frame of this timeline it's going to record the position, scale, and rotation for every single point of this piece of paper. And as you can see, it doesn't take that long to do it. Now, once that's finished, you jump over to this cloth tag, click it, and you want to go to the tag and turn off cloth engine, this right here. Turn that off, because if you don't, it's still calculating your cloth, and you won't get this. You won't get this nice scrub through, which is just awesome. If you forget that, here's what you're going to get. You're going to get this jittery, and you're going to freak out because you think you've done something wrong. Well, turn that off. That problem goes away. It took me several times of doing that accidentally to go, okay, yeah, I keep forgetting that, dummy. Alright, so now we've got this. The beauty of this point cache tag is I can now go save. Okay, and we'll call this paper cache 3. Okay, so now if I empty that cache, I hit play, nothing happens. Here's the beauty of the point cache tag. I hit load, I grab that file I just saved, hit open. That animation is back. It doesn't go anywhere. As long as the points of this object match the number of points that were in the original object, this will work. So all you do now, we've got one of them done. We empty that cache. We disable that. Okay, I've disabled the point cache tag, so it no longer affects anything. Okay, so we'll turn this off. We'll go back to the beginning. We'll go back to our cloth engine by clicking on the cloth tag. Turn on the cloth engine. So now we hit play. We've got the same animation, but now we're running it through the cloth simulation. All you have to do now, the beauty of this is come in here and change, some of these numbers, and you'll get a completely different result, and that's awesome because now you don't have to worry about it. You've already set it up once. You change some of these numbers to whatever, just randomize 15. Drop that scale way down, drop the frequency way up, and see what happens. And now you're getting a completely different animation. And you can even come over here in the cloth and drop the iterations down and get a little less structural integrity to that piece of paper. Okay, so let's pretend that's good enough. I know that when I was working on this, even practicing it before doing the tutorial, you'll want to spend a little bit more time tweaking this. You want it to really look good. You want to really have some good motion to it, so that way you can pull off the effect. So for now, though, we'll call that good. We'll rewind, go to our point cache tag, which is still there, the beauty of setting it up once, re-enable it, and calculate. Sit back and wait for that to go. Like I said, this point cache tag does not take very long to use, and it's so handy, especially for this. It's something that's going to save your computer when you go to start multiplying this with a cloner or whatever you choose to use. It's cached. It's right there. It's ready to go, and that's awesome. So now we can take. Before we forget, I almost forgot, we have to save that, and we'll call that paper cache 4. And we can now delete all of those. Okay, so I had 2 of them pre-built, which is paper cache here. As you can see, it changes, and this is a completely different animation than we just did. You can also check out paper cache 2, changes. See, that's just what's awesome about this technique is I can come in, I can make 20 of these, and you can make a really interesting and involved simulation that really doesn't take a whole lot of work. So now that we have that, we can get rid of this cloth engine, and we're ready to go. What we are going to do is use MoGraph, because like I said, I ran into those issues with the particles and the emitters, and it didn't look good, so I chose MoGraph, and I'm going to show you how to get a nice effect out of MoGraph cloners. So if you missed that, let me explain what I just did. Select your object, go to MoGraph menu, and hold down the Alt or Option key, I believe, and click your cloner, and that automatically sets it up for you. So we'll select this, we'll call this paper, and we'll make a copy of this, put that in there, and make another copy. Alright, so paper 1, paper 2, paper 3, and paper 4. Okay, and we'll select all of these and go to Simulation, Rigid Body. Now, where we go from here is how you really pull this off. We're going to set the cloner, instead of linear, to grid array. Okay, 3 by 3 by 3, and for now I'm going to leave these separations, the size, at the default. Okay, I'll show you why in just a second. Now we select our cloner, and we go to MoGraph, effector, random. Okay, and we can pull that in here. That's why I group everything in nulls and keeps it all organized so you can collapse that and you can build your scene around it. So now with this random effector, let's add some randomness to this. Not too much. Let's go 300 there. And let's go 175. Alright. So now let's switch over to lines so that you can at least see what we're doing here. Okay. So we've got this group of cloners, or I'm sorry, a group of paper, and each one of these will be completely different animations using the point cache tag. So we'll load number 1, we'll load number 2, and then we'll load number 3, and then we'll load number 4. Alright, now if we press play, they all drop. Well, I really don't want them to drop that much, so let's check our project settings. Control D, Command D on a Mac, I believe. Go to Dynamics, General, and I want to drop this gravity down a little bit because I don't want to have to fight gravity so much. I want more of a floating paper kind of look. So now when I hit play, they won't drop nearly as fast. You'll see they're paper. And there you go. All right. So now where do we go from here? Well, you added a random effector to this cloner. It's right there. Let's go ahead and let's add simulation particles turbulence. Okay. Now you'll notice that doesn't show up here. I want to add some turbulence, man. Why won't? Well, here's how you get that. You go to this dynamics tag and you can draw a loop selection over all of them at once and go to force, include turbulence. Okay, that guarantees that each one of these pieces of paper that are being produced via this cloner will have turbulence applied to them. And if you crank this up, you'll start seeing it. Crank up the scale, crank up the amount, and as you can see, this is beginning to look a little bit better. It's a little crazy right now because I cranked it to 90. So let's pause, rewind, put this back down to something around 25. Now what we're going to do is drop this turbulence into this null, and then we're going to select all of these dynamics tags again, and on this force tab, this is something that gets overlooked and overlooked. This follow position, follow rotation, linear damping, and angular damping, these will really help you out in the jam if you're trying to get some control over this dynamic system. It helps you kind of point it in the right direction, if you will, and it really gives you a little bit of control up to as much control as you want. Basically what this does is this will tell these dynamic objects to follow the position or rotation of its parent MoGraph object, whether that be a fracture object or, in this case, a cloner. Now, be careful, because if you crank this to 10, this won't they won't do anything. You know, they'll just follow right along, which is kind of the point. But as you can see, you get a little bounce. We've got that turbulence added to the force list. It's going to affect it. We've got follow position. I'm going to drop that back down to about 2. I don't want too much of that. Now we're going to take this cloner and collapse it, because now we've got our paper cluster built. Now we need to move it. So let's go to the top view and hit H to see everything. Zoom out a little bit, and let's grab a spline tool. Let's grab the B spline. Let's go for that. Why not? And let's start way over here and come over here and here and here and here. Basically, what I'm doing is drawing the path for our paper, okay? And we'll call this paper path, okay? So, now let's hit F3 to go to the side view, hit H to see everything, and let's pull this up. Oops, sorry, let's go to object mode here and pull this up. We want the paper a little bit above a floor, okay? Put the floor at the bottom, that's where I like to keep them. Let's see, let's move this paper. We don't need to because we're going to right click on the paper null, which contains our effectors, our paper objects, everything. So right click on that and go to Cinema 4D tags, align to spline, and grab that paper path and drag it in there. You'll see it pop. Let's go back to our perspective view, hit H, and there it is. Okay, now we can now animate this position along this spline, okay? And that's what we're going to do. So first keyframe goes at frame 0, why not? And that's 0% on this align to spline object tag. Go to the end of our timeline, and let's drop it to 100, why not? Okay. Control click on this little yellow dot now, and that turns it to red. That means you have a new keyframe. Okay, and that is it. Let's hit play. See what happens. As you can see, it is still slow. You know, it's still simulating dynamics on each one of these pieces of paper. But watch when it turns this corner. You can see how it has a little bit of inertia. I think maybe this spline is too big, so what we'll do is hit H to see everything, grab the spline, make sure you're in object mode, hit T for scale, and you can scale this dynamically. We can put this way down here, and now hit H, and we're back to where we need to be. We'll hit play. And this may be running a little too slow along the spline, so click the align to spline tag, and you've got a keyframe right here. Those are hard to select when they're at the end, so if you click in this area right where these little dashes are and drag, it'll let you select that keyframe, and then you grab this light gray area and it'll drag it. So let's make that pretty short. Let's make this fly through there. Okay, you'll see as it turns corners, the group will have some inertia, and it's not following its parent perfectly, but it's kind of tagging along, and that's what you want, especially in this area. As it turns this big wide corner, makes this U-turn and comes to a stop, you'll see it kind of go past its point and come back to it, and that's kind of the interactivity that you want with this. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this paper path closer to the ground, okay, and I'm going to make the floor dynamic. Right click, simulation tags, and collider body. Just in case any of these happen to make it down, they will bounce off that floor. Okay, and that's pretty much it. You know, you get in here and you tweak and you play with your settings, you play with the grouping, and this is where you can come back to your cloner because nothing has been destroyed. This is all, you know, parametric per se. You know, you can crank these up to whatever you want if your computer can handle it. You can also, like I mentioned before, really crank these numbers back down because your random effector is taking care of a lot of that for you. Okay, so go back to the beginning, hit play, and there you go. If you want it to not follow it as well, you can come over here to your paper, select them. let's go ahead and hit pause just in case. Select those dynamic tags on the paper only, not the floor, and drop this back down to 1 or even 0.5. That way it's only influencing it a little bit. It's only saying, okay, please come along. It's not making it stick to it. Now you see it's kind of just floating through now. I don't know. You just got to play around with it until you get what you're looking for. I kind of like it to kind of follow it, but have a little bit of a life of its own. And you can achieve that with more random effectors, more turbulence, and just really layer these things one on top of the other, one on top of the other, one on top of the other, until you get the look you're looking for. And that's pretty much it. That's the technique. The key thing to remember are these point cache tags. You know, these are extremely helpful. Like I said, creating as many of these as you can will give you a more interesting and more realistic simulation of this paper. And, you know, they're pretty quick to create, so I don't see a big loss there. It's not a huge time hit. It took, you know, maybe 10-15 minutes at most to create 4 of them. So you could create 20 of them, and this cloner will iterate through those as you wish. So that's it. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope it works out for you. If you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to drop a line in the comments. As always, check back often. If you'd like to see maybe how this was composited into some of the examples that I produced, I'd be open to do that if there's enough interest. Maybe doing a series where we drop this into After Effects and composite it with a background. I'd be open for that. If you guys want to do that, let me know and we'll get it going. Anyway, that's it for now. Thanks a lot. Mark Pearson here again with Footprint Productions. Come back.